Hi and welcome to the Bacall Pant tutorial. For this tutorial, I have made a mini version of the pattern because it's going to be a whole lot easier for you to see what's going on. So after you cut out your pattern pieces, you should have a back and a front, and then you've got two facings, okay? I'm going to ask you not to cut these facings out yet because you might have to recut them depending on what you do later with fitting your pants. So as you're cutting these out, you'll notice you've got your grain lines here. Depending on what your fabric is, you may be able to fit your pattern pieces on your fabric like this, but you'll notice that the north end of the pants is here on one pattern piece and here on another. This will not work for you if your fabric looks at all different in one direction or another. So if it has a nap of any kind, or if it has any kind of pattern on it, you cannot lay it out this way. So you probably bought a little extra fabric so that you can lay them out, you know, end to end like that, so that the north end of the pants is in the same direction on your fabric. Now, obviously, I'm not going to have any trouble fitting on here, but you also want to make sure that the grain line is going in the same direction as your warp threads. So I've got two selvages at this end and a fold at this end, and a cut end here and a cut end here. So that's how your fabric should be oriented. And depending on the width of your fabric and what you're using, you just want to make sure, as a general rule, that the north end of the pattern is in the same direction. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut these out. But before I take the pattern piece off, we're going to do a bunch of marking, and that's going to make our life easier once we get further on into this process. Okay, so I've got my back and my front cut out, and then I've got my leftover fabric and my two facings. We're gonna cut those out later after we do our fitting. So the next thing we need to do is our markings. So we're gonna start with, let me turn this around, the dart on the back. So what I like to do is open my layers, assuming that this is the right side of my fabric. There's our two wrong sides, there's the right side. So on the wrong sides, I'm gonna mark the legs of the dart, and then I'm gonna mark the point of the dart on both of these. So that will allow me to set up my dart and sew it. That's all we need to mark on the back. On the front, we have these pleat markings. So what I would do is, again, there's right side, wrong side, wrong side, right side. So I'm gonna take the wrong sides and I'm gonna mark here and here. There's 4 of these little pleat markings. And the thing is, we may actually be ignoring these depending on what kind of fit we need to do. You could also mark the bottom of the pleat, but again, that may change depending on what you feel like you need to do. I'm using a pencil here so that it'll be easier for you guys to see. Normally we'd use chalk or a disappearing, like a friction marker. So that is what we need to mark on the front. Now we can go ahead and take our pattern pieces off, but I have a thing that I do that makes things kind of go better, especially when I'm working with a fabric where it's really hard to tell right side from the wrong side, is I'm gonna mark with a pin the right side of my fabric. That way I'm not gonna sew it the wrong way by accident. So we can take this off and then take this off And I'm going to take these 2 pins and again mark the right side of my fabric. All right, so the first thing we're going to need to do is our dart. So we've marked the 2 dart legs where it starts and the point where the dart ends. So I'm going to fold right sides together, matching up the 2 leg ends and then making it go to the point. So the way I usually sew this, here, I'm going to flip it this way, it's easier to see. All right, so I'm going to pin along the dart length, and then I usually put a pin right where the dart needs to end. So it looks like that. Now, if you want, you can go ahead and draw that dart line in. You can just, draw from the legs to the point and just follow that line as you're sewing. You can do that, no problem. The important thing is to sew from the fat end of the dart to the skinny end. You are not going to back tack at this end. You're going to leave long tails and tie them. So I'm going to go ahead and set up these darts on both backs, making sure that I've got right sides together, wrong side out here where your markings are. And I'll come back and I'll show you how to finish off those darts and make sure that they're going to lie nice and flat. I've sewn and pressed my darts, and the way you can tell that your dart is good is if you don't have like a big fat pucker right there. If it goes nice and flat after you've pressed it like this, then you're good to go. If you're happy with it, then you can take the ends of your threads at the point and tie them. If I can get them apart here. I'll just tie it in a nice little square knot so it doesn't become undone. If you're not happy, go ahead and take your darts out and do them again. It is not unusual to have to do that. Your fabric shifts a little bit. You don't go gradually enough off the point. You might need to do it again. That's, don't stress that. That's kind of normal. Once you're happy, go ahead and tie off your ends at the point, and then you can trim them, trim all your threads, and then we are ready for our next step. The next thing we need to do is get our zipper in. Now, because I'm working on this very small piece, I'm not going to be able to demonstrate the zipper for you, but you're going to have a link in your instructions to a fantastic zipper tutorial, actually 2 of them. You have a choice. You can either use an invisible zipper or you can do a single lap zipper. Either way is good. In general, the zipper usually goes on your left side. So what you're going to do is find the right side of your fabric and make sure that this is the one that fits your left side, and then put it right sides together with the back. So see where my pins are? There's a pin here and there's a pin here. That way I know they're right sides together. Also, you should be able to see your dart flapping around out there. And you're going to install your left side zipper right here. And again, you can use either kind of zipper, no problem. I'm just going to sew up this seam myself, just because there's no way I'm going to be able to get a full-size zip in a piece this small. Remember, you're sewing everything right sides together, and you'll notice that my seam allowances are itty-bitty. That's because it's to scale with this. Your seam allowances are 5/8 of an inch. So there's my fake zipper. You guys should have your zipper in on your left side. And the next thing we're gonna do is sew the out seams and the inseams for each pair of leg pieces. So we've got a front and a back. These are sewn together at the zipper. Now we're gonna finish that seam, that out seam, sew it all the way to here. Then you're gonna make these edges match. They're not gonna lie flat together because we have more booty in back than we do in front. So once you get your out seam sewn, then you're gonna take your inseam edges, match them up, and sew that seam as well. You're gonna leave this curve right here, you're gonna leave those curves open. You're gonna do it on both legs. So again, you should have one front and one back here, and then you should have a front and a back there. So we're gonna sew up here, sew here. You should now have two pant legs. We've got a front and a back sewn together at the inseam and the outseam. And another one here, they should be mirror images of each other. See how this gap is there? Definitely want to see that. That's the back, that's the back, that's the front. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these pant legs and we're going to turn it right side out, just one of them. We're going to do the little pants magic trick that I like to call the double elephant trunk. All right, so now this one's right side out and this one's inside out. We're going to take the right side out one and stick it inside this one. So now, if you match up the inseam right there, that's where the short leg seam is, the inseam. You match up these two inseams. Let's stick a pin in there so they stay together. You should end up with this beautiful, perfect U. And what that is your crotch curve. So the long one is your back and the short one is your front. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna sew that crotch curve all in one go. I just pin this together. And you want to double check right side to right side, okay? So everything's right sides together. Okay. Got all our edges matched. So now we have this beautiful crotch curve. So we're going to sew all the way along that curve, and then I'll meet you back here. Okay, so now my crotch curve is sewn from here to here. So now we can turn our pants so they actually should look like a pair of pants now. There you go. This is the back with the darts, and this is the front. So now this is the point at which you're going to try these guys on. You could just take the pleats on the front according to where the markings are, but that may or may not fit you exactly right. So, because we're all different shapes. Here, I can take my pins out now since it's obvious right side, wrong side. Here, let me turn these right side out. There we go, we got very glamorous pants for a 1-year-old. Okay, so when you take your pleats, you want to fold your fabric so that the opening of the pleat is going toward the outside edge, toward your outseam, okay? It's not gonna look great. It's gonna look like a little poochie if you send your pleat going this way. So you want your pleat to go that way. And the way we've suggested you do your pleats, we've suggested 2 of them. Depending on your shape, you might want 1 or you might want 3. It all depends. You do want to make sure that they're equidistant from your center front seam here. You may or may not want to sew them down part way. We do have a suggestion, you know, you've got the mark where their pleat goes, and then there's a suggestion for how long to sew them down. This is the point at which you're gonna pin like crazy and make sure it's exactly the way you want it before you sew them down for real. So you have to try these on, pin your pleats, make sure you're happy with them. I'm just gonna take the pleats as marked on here. You're literally gonna fold right sides together so that the 2 marks here and there match up, and the 2 marks at the end match up. Everything's folded right side together, and you're just gonna sew from here to there. Same thing on this one. Match up those marks, right sides together, and then you sew from here to there, from the mark to the mark. I'm going to do that on both sides, and then I will see you back here. My pleats are done, and you can see that I've pressed them out so that the opening of the pleat is toward the side seam, like that. So now you're gonna go ahead and try these on, make sure you're absolutely happy with them, and then we're gonna go ahead and put our facings on. So a good way to tell if the facing pattern is still gonna fit is if you just kind of walk it along. Remember, you're gonna have seam allowance sticking out here and seam allowance sticking out here. Yep, it looks like this is gonna fit. Unless you did something really unusual with the back of your pants, the back facing should fit just fine. So we've designed this so that the back facing actually has a center back seam. In case you decide that you want to take a little pinch in the back, you're able to not just undo the center back seam here, but you can also do it on the facing so that they remain adjustable for you. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these out as is. If this is too small, what you're going to want to do is cut it down the middle and spread it so that it's just wide enough plus seam allowance to fit the way you've put your pleats together. So if you need more room, you're going to cut it down the middle right on that grain line and split it. If it's too big, you can just take a little tuck in the middle so that it fits just right, plus seam allowance on both sides. And like I said, this one, the back one, should be just fine. So you're going to cut 2 of these, and so your center back seam, you're going to cut 1 of these once you have it adjusted. Here's my front facing. Here's my back facing, sewn right sides together. There's my center back seam. You can see that I've pressed it flat, open and flat, so it'll lay nicely. Now we have to double check the right side of the front facing is going to be facing into you. So this is the left side. This is the right side of my fabric, wrong side of my fabric. This is the left side of my pants. It's going to be right in here. That's where my zipper is. So I'm going to fold the seam allowance over and press that. And then I'm going to sew the other ends of my facing, right sides together with the back facing. Okay, so there's the right side of my facing. This is my left, the left side of my waistband. The right side of my waistband. Here, I'm gonna sew the back piece on. All right, so here's the center back seam. There's the right side seam. There's the left side with the seam allowance pressed toward the wrong side. Now we're gonna take this whole thing and we're gonna make it go right sides together with our pants. Here's our zipper. So we're gonna match up that fold with the seam, with the edge of the zipper. And I'm gonna pin this all the way around. This side seam on your facing should match up with the side seam on your pants. And you wanna make sure that you have your pleats pressed the correct direction. In fact, if you wanted to be really careful, you could base these down before you put your facing on. You just want to make sure that they're facing the correct direction so your pleats are going to fall properly. And then this goes all the way around this way. When you get back to the zipper, you're going to fold down your seam allowance again and pin that down right there. And then you're going to sew all the way around. And your facing should be on. Here's your zipper on the side. Everything should be matched up. You can now fold your facing toward the inside and give it a nice press. You're probably going to want to do something to finish this edge. You can either turn it under 1/4 inch and stitch it down. You could serge it, you could zigzag it, you could bind it, a whole bunch of options just depending on what you like to do and what kind of equipment you have available. Basically, once you have this thing pressed to the inside and you've got your edge finished, the only other step I would recommend would be to understitch the facing. So here's what that means. So here's my pants, here's my facing. And you can see there's the seam allowance for the facing. So if you stitch right along the seam allowance on the facing like this, so you're catching the seam allowance on your facing, that's going to help your facing stay pressed to the inside. You're also probably going to want to tack it down like on the pleats, on the side seam here, on your darts, on your center back seam. You're just going to want to take a couple little hand tacks just to like sew this edge to wherever your seam allowance or anything that you can grab onto. And then it'll stay really nice, especially if you do that kind of understitching. It will definitely behave better. And that is it. Your pants are done. So you're taking care of that. You can now do your hems and wear them someplace nice. Hope you enjoyed our little tutorial, and we'll see you again soon.